Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. As Tim just prayed, we've got a beautiful Lord's Day and a great blessing to be together today. We are studying Ecclesiastes. We've taken a longer, more thorough look at this book, and but that's winding up quickly. We're in chapter 11, and we're just things going to come quickly to a conclusion here as we've studied this very interesting book, I think. As a heads up, when we finish this, our intention is to go to a study of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And some study guides are on the table in the back if you want to pick one of those up, because we'll just transition immediately into that when we finish Ecclesiastes. I don't know whether I don't think we'll get done today, but we might. If we don't, we'll probably conclude next week in Ecclesiastes and move into Hebrews. We're in chapter 11. We talked about the first verses of chapter 11 last week, but let's just sort of reset the context. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 1. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Give a portion to 7, also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. If the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. Excuse me. And if the tree fall toward the south or toward the north, in the place where the tree falleth, there it shall be. He that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. As thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the works of God, who maketh all. In the morning sow thy seed, and in the evening withhold not thine hand, for thou knowest not whether shall prosper either this or that, or whether they both shall be alike good. Again, we talked about the majority of those verses last week. Just the last couple of verses, 5 and 6. As thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit. If you look at other translations, that's King James, of course. If you look at other translations, more than likely, instead of spirit there, they're going to say wind, which probably makes better sense here. You do not know the way of the wind, or how the wind blows, or how the bones grow in the womb of her that is with child. In other words, there's just some basic things that happen in nature. They happen all the time. That's not in your control. You can't change it. You can't change the way the wind blows. And although, obviously, men through scientific discovery have learned more about how the bones grow, a fetus in its mother's womb, still there's a lot that we don't know, and obviously, certainly we can't reproduce. We're not even in control of that. We may understand some of the process. We understand some of the processes of the wind, but we can't change the wind. We understand some of the processes of how a fetus develops in the womb, but we can't change the processes. Those things are not in our power. Those are beyond our control. And that's what he's saying. And in the same way, you don't know the works of God. That is, there are things going on that are not in your realm of control. You do not have power over them. And so what you do, verse 6 is, do all the good that you can whenever you can, because you don't know when it's going to come back favorably. And so I don't think he's talking exclusively about sowing physical seed in the ground, although the principle is applicable there. I think he's stating that sort of metaphorically toward all good things that you might do. Sow your seed, do good, get it out there, because you don't know, will this prosper? Will that prosper? Will this bring a blessing? Will that bring a blessing? Just do whatever good thing you can, because there's a lot of things that are not within your control. You just be busy doing all the good things that you can. Thomas?
Would you say this goes back to the vanities of vanities, of like things will never change?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just the idea that, we would like to be, have you ever had a day when you really needed the wind not to blow? But the wind blew. I couldn't stop the wind from blowing. Even in my Saturday thing, have you ever known somebody who was informed that their baby, they were expecting a baby and there was a deformity or some problem with the baby. Sure like to change that. But in this physical world, that's vanity. You can't do it. It vexes you if you plague yourself with those kind of thoughts. So just deal with it. Do what you can.
So would you say this is telling us that we should just not worry about it as much as like most people do then?
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. Been lots of observation about worry. Most things you worry about never come to pass anyway. And the ones that do, you can't do anything about either. So you're wasting your time. I think that's good observation. All right, so I really do believe that that's the gist of this. We often apply, my guess is that you have heard, you should have heard it because I have used it, verse 6, relative to personal evangelism and spreading the gospel. That would be an application. It's not, obviously it's not the application that was principally under consideration when these words were penned, but it is an application of this. Sow your seed. Withhold not thine hand. You don't know whether this or that. So I try to teach as many people as I can. I cannot predict how a specific individual might receive the word and act upon it. But that's not in my control. That's not in my power. What is in my power is spreading the seed. So again, I don't think that was the initial thought, obviously, in the penning of these words, but it certainly has an application. Thoughts or comments here? Anybody? All right, so again, good admonitions for life. It's interesting to me that in this last section here, this almost transitions into a sort of rapid-fire Proverbs, much like you read in the book of Proverbs, but just random observations about life that are good, valuable principles. Tom, do you have a thought?
Just, agricultural type of comment there today. Farmer just doesn't go out sow in the morning, take it easy in the evening. If it's planting season, he's out there planting in the morning and he's planting in the evening.
In farming country, you see them in the field at night with their lights on, still working. Yeah.
It's a time to sow, it's a time to sow.
You got to get it out there. Yeah, exactly right. All right. Now, a new context begins at verse 7. All of this, by the way, if we look at our chart that we've been looking at every week, is in this last part of the last section, or the last part of the last sermon, as we divide up the book of Ecclesiastes. And so all these have sort of the notion of, you can see God in this. Let's read beginning verse 7 to the end of the chapter. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 7. Truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man live many years and rejoice in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from thy heart, put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Now I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 12, verse 1. I think this is a classic example of a bad chapter break that men have inserted, because I think very clearly chapter 12, verse 1 is a continuation of that thought. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Now that's going to continue on too, but I really believe that verse 1 has this view of speaking to young people. And I know you've heard lots of sermons over the years dealing with these admonitions toward young people, which are really good. Truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. Now I might have some trouble understanding what he has in mind there if it were not for the very next verse, which says, but, so he's drawing a contrast, but if a man live many years, and he's talking about life. The light is sweet. pleasant thing for the eyes to behold. Contrasted to a man who has lived many years. Oh, okay. He's talking about the time of your youth, right? And so it's sort of a flowery way of expressing the days of youth. The days of youth are like a bright sunny day. You know, as we've mentioned already, we've got a beautiful day today in Middle Tennessee. And so you look at a beautiful day like today, and so Solomon's saying a beautiful day is like the days of your youth. And so he says that's a sweet thing, it's a pleasant thing, it's a good thing. But when you get old, if you live many years, and even if you live many years, rejoice in those good days, but remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity. So, here's a young person, healthy, strong, vibrant, enjoying life. He says, enjoy those good days. Enjoy those good days of your youth. But know this, if those days of youth are days of bright sunshine, the days when you are older and you have physical infirmities and all of the things that come with age, aches and pains and troubles of that nature, they're going to do not imagine that you will escape that. I know that when we're young, we have the tendency to think, oh yeah, well, I don't have to worry about that. And you really don't have to worry about it, as we were saying earlier. Worry doesn't solve anything. But the fact of the matter is, realistically speaking, know that will come. You're not going to be a young person forever. And you will have those dark days of infirmity and trouble and pain. Know that they will come. That's a part of life. And he says, all that cometh is vanity. In other words, if you put all your eggs in the basket of your physical life, that's a vain thing to pursue, because that's not going to last. All that cometh is vanity. You might be young now and you might be enjoying the pleasures of youth. You might be enjoying good health and all the things but vanity is that doesn't last. And you're going to get old and you'll have your aches and pains and troubles and woes as well as anybody else. Know that is true. So, what would we say then to a young person who seems to not be accepting the reality? No, here's a young person who acts like they will live forever and never have to worry about anything other than enjoying life, getting the most out of life, enjoying the pleasures of life. Well, if that's where your value is, know that you're investing in a vain thing that will not last. And that's what he's saying here. Thoughts or comments? Anybody? Thomas?
I feel as Christians, we're always taught to view the joy and the blessings of life. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But here in Ecclesiastes, it tells us all the wrong things of life. How bad the world is, and how you should weep over it. You should remember those bad things, because they're going to come up again.
Yeah.
And we generally always push it away, but we should, cry about it, pray to God about it,
Right. And he's going to say here, he's not saying it's bad to enjoy your youth, but just view it realistically. It's not forever. And there will be other things that happen. And so, yeah, I think it's right to say it's good to, and he's going to exactly say that in these verses, enjoy the days of your youth. But don't have your eyes shut to the realities of our physical existence. The reality of our physical existence is we're all going to get old and sick and die. Not to be too morbid, but that's the reality of life. Don't forget that. I mean, you'd be a foolish person if you just ignored that is the reality for us all. So he goes on to say, and this is exactly what Thomas was mentioning, verse 9, rejoice, O young man, rejoice, O young man, in thy youth. Let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth. Walk in the ways of thy heart, in the sight of thine eyes. So, very much so. And maybe sometimes we don't emphasize this enough to our young people. Enjoy your youth. It's a good thing. It's actually a blessing from God. You're young and you're healthy and you're energetic and you have lots of things going for you. Enjoy that. We should not be preaching doom and gloom so much that young people can't even appreciate the blessings of their youth. It's a blessing. Enjoy it. It's good. However, he says, and this of course is the great warning, but know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. While you're enjoying your youth, don't forget the concept of personal accountability and responsibility and judgment. This is not saying, therefore, go out and sow your wild oats. Go sow your wild oats. It's understood that in your youth, you're going to do bad things. Young people do. Young people go out and get drunk. Young people smoke marijuana. Young people engage in fornication. That's what young people do. Go on. Just go on and do that. We understand that's what you're going to do. No, he's not saying that. He's saying enjoy your youth, but while you're enjoying it, don't forget that you still are accountable before God and you will answer in judgment. So don't engage while you're enjoying your youth. Don't say that that's a license to engage in sinful things that sadly young people often do. Tom?
That's a concept that really puts on. There are a number of things that are wholesome and worthwhile doing when you're young.
Yeah.
Sometimes we as older people, we get caught up in the cares of life, and we're trying to earn a living and doing everything. And sometimes we just don't set aside times to rejuvenate and appreciate what's going on. We get caught up in, paying bills and doing everything that needs to be done. And sometimes when we look back at youth, we look at some of them as, irresponsible. But there's things that, you can do. But you have responsibilities. You can't, if you take on something, you've got a responsibility to do it. You just can't, everybody's going to do a party, something, but I've agreed to go work for somebody at a certain time. Do you just skip like a lot of people that I know that, something came up, they'll show up for work, but Friday they'll call in and say, not going. They wouldn't dare think of talking to their boss on maybe Monday and say, hey, Friday, a bunch of young people are getting together to go and do something. Could I have the time off? They'll wait till Friday or Thursday night and say, I won't be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
and what you're talking about there is responsibility, accountability. Even if God was not in the picture, you'd be a wise person if you just showed a responsible conduct toward your job or whatever else. Put God in the picture, and it's really important to understand that our choices, our actions have consequences. Most importantly, they have spiritual, eternal consequences. So never, while you're enjoying your youth, fine, good. But do not forget the business of accountability. Wade?
I think also, too, as a young man, you're very carefree. You do things that people want you to do. You're easily led, by other people. And I think part of the things that he's saying here is that, and maybe he's not specifically spelling it out, but I can just see in my mind, as there are things that I did in my youth that I sit back now and I go, why did I do that? And I have images in my head thinking, why did I participate in that? Why did I do? You have a lot of regret, but if I was doing what my Creator wanted me to do when I was in my youth, I wouldn't have to worry about those things. Those things wouldn't have been in my head.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, that's some of the things that he's saying now, because if you're honoring God, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, when you get old, you're not going to have that stuff in your head floating around thinking, man, I was such an idiot.
The word that we use about that is regret. And I think all of us in our lives, especially all of us who are older, can look back with regret over some of the foolish things we did when we were younger. And I really think that's what he's saying in verse 10 there. Therefore, remove sorrow from thy heart, put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. In other words, don't do the things that are going to bring regret later as you think back on those things. that's a hard lesson to learn when you're young, but it is a valuable one. Everything, you young people, everything that you can do to avoid looking back later and saying, "Well, sure, that was so stupid. That was so stupid of me to do that." To the extent that you're able to live so that you don't look back with regrets is a good thing. So again, enjoy your youth. It's a great blessing from God to be a young person. But know that you'll be accountable not only to God, but you also will bear the scars of regret if you're not careful. Tom?
Remember, a few years back, went to a high school reunion with a bunch of friends and things, and classmates, and we're sitting around talking about experiences we had and things that we did, and it was interesting that some of the ones that were the real wild bunch were sitting back and reflecting and said, "Oh, just the regrets that they had. Why did I go out and do that? How can you remember that you did that? I got in all this trouble because we were out doing drinking and carrying on and stuff." And a couple of my friends were talking about places we went and things we did as a group and wholesome type activities, and they just didn't have those memories. Their memories were
They're basically their memories were consumed with regret.
Yeah.
John?
There's one of the things that I have a staff of people that I manage at work, and occasionally someone will make a mistake on where I come or something. But I'm a mentor style leader, so I'll sit down and I'll talk to them and explain what the mistake was and give them a chance to sit and talk to me about it and tell me what they think. And oftentimes I get this, "Well, that's really, we've done this thing we've ever done, what was he thinking?" And I said, "Okay, well, so we all make mistakes, but what did you learn from it?"
Yeah.
And try to understand that, try to get them to understand that the lesson that they learn is the wisdom they carry with them.
Yeah.
The wisdom of the scriptures is there for us to use.
Yeah.
And the reason that we have regret is because we know that what the Word teaches is right, and what we did was against that law.
So there's a great contrast here, as you say, between wisdom and folly or vanity, and we want to be on the side of wisdom. We understand that there are certainly a lot of temptations associated with young age, but we need to pursue wisdom in all these kind of things. So remove sorrow from thy heart, put away evil from thy flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity. They're vain in the sense that they're not enduring. They won't last, and it needs to be understood that way. So he says, by the way, I wanted to mention this idea. We mentioned this section is not saying go out and sow your wild oats while you're young. It's understood you will. That's just what young people do. It's not saying that. Now, some people try to make that erroneous application of these verses. For instance, my understanding is that the Amish people believe that they should allow young people to, and they actually use the expression, sow their wild oats. And they actually make provision for them to do so. And so they will provide a facility, provide the alcohol, provide all the things that you might sinfully pursue as a young person. And their thinking is, young people are going to do that. They got to do that. We'll provide them a safe place to do that. They will see by their own personal experience that there's no satisfaction in that, and then they will come back from that, and they'll never be tempted to go that direction again. That's actually a practiced philosophy among those groups, which is really bizarre because our impression of them is that they're very conservatively minded people, but they actually have that practice, at least in certain sects of the Amish religion. And they call it sowing their wild oats. And they might very well use this text as justification for that. That's just absolutely wrong. This text is not teaching that, and there's no basis for that kind of an approach in the Word of God. I don't have to drink poison. I don't have to personally experience drinking poison to know that I shouldn't drink poison. And that being the case, you could say that about a lot of things. You don't have to, as a young person, you don't have to engage in every form of immorality to know that it's a bad thing and that it will bear evil fruit. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make the same mistakes everybody else has ever made through history. You can learn from their mistakes and avoid them. And I really think that this text would urge us to do that. Imani.
One time we all experience is the best teacher. Elaborate on that. Experience is the best teacher as long as you're using someone else's experience. You don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. When that's true, whether it's in a spiritual sense, a moral sense, or even just in everyday things that we might do. When we see someone else doing whatever it is that they make a mistake and it doesn't work well, we don't have to make that same mistake ourselves. We can learn from other people's experience and hopefully have a smoother journey through life than they did.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Alan?
Yeah, there's so many mistakes you can make. And avoid the ones you can avoid. You're going to make plenty of other mistakes.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
No reason to add on to your other mistakes.
Exactly right. Yeah. All right. Now, again, I think this context runs right through this chapter break, so don't let that sort of throw you off in your understanding. He's still talking to young people in chapter 12, verse 1. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. I've always thought that verse was kind of oddly constructed in the King James translation. Notice, maybe the New King James makes it clearer. The New King James says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near, when you shall say, I have no pleasure in them. What do you have no pleasure in? In other words, I'm old, I'm sick, I'm not enjoying life too much. I think that's what he's saying. So remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before you reach the time of life wherein you're sick and you're ailing and you're really not enjoying life anymore. Life is a great difficulty. Your day-to-day existence becomes hard. Serve your Creator now, before those difficult times come, when you'll say, I really am not taking much pleasure in life right now. My life is so hard and I'm dealing with so many problems that I'm not enjoying life too much now. He says, remember your Creator before that. So, as you're a young person and you're enjoying the times of youth, you realize that you have some special tools to use in serving God. You young people have things, opportunities, situations available to you that those of us who are older don't have anymore. We probably had them when we were young too, but you're in that phase where you have unique opportunities in service to God that we don't possess anymore because we're old. Use those things now. And don't have the point of view that says, when I am older, I'll get around to serving God. When I get old, I'll devote myself. I'll be more involved. I'll work harder when I'm old. Right now I'm too busy enjoying youthful passions and pleasures. He says, don't do that. Remember your Creator now, before you reach those difficult days of older life. When that, by the way, we understand that happens as we get older and older. You know, I've talked to old people who say, I can hardly get from one doctor appointment to the next one. So in those times, you become necessarily preoccupied with the frailties of old age. And thus you cannot exert as much energy in doing acts of service in the kingdom. So Solomon's saying, do that now, before you reach that point when you really honestly don't have the strength or energy to do that anymore. So you didn't do it when you were young, because you said you'll do it when you get old. Now you're old and you say you can't do it because you don't feel well. When were you going to do that? He says, do it while you're young and while you have that energy. Wade.
You know, it's easier to start a good habit than it is to break a bad habit. And so when you're young, if you can start good habits like reading the Bible every day or calling and checking on people, I mean, there's lots of different things that you can start good habits of doing. If you can start them now as a young person, then that'll take you through the rest of your life. And, you know, it's an enjoyable thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you don't start that and you get into a bad habit of doing stuff, and later on you go, oh man, I wish I could break this bad habit and do something else, it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah. So go ahead. Tom?
Procrastination and things is something that, you know, is a thing that we sort of learn, and we start practicing it. The more we practice it, the greater it becomes. Sometimes we just need to learn the discipline. You know, yesterday we worked all day, we came in, we had some dirt delivered, we had to spread it out. While spreading it out, the track came off the machine. Well, you know, it's not a pleasant task to think to do it. There's places I need to be and things I'd rather enjoy doing, but the choices were either fix it while it was still light last night, or set it up and go out this afternoon, probably in the heat of the day, and work on it in the heat of the day. So, fixed it, got it over with, got it done. So that frees me up for today to do other things that, you know, I might enjoy when we're doing.
Okay.
And sometimes we want to put off hard tasks that need to be done now because they're unpleasant. But sometimes we just have to do them. And that's discipline. That's something that as young people, you once you learn, you take that responsibility. You find out you end up having more time to do the things that you want to do by taking care of the matters that need to be taken care of.
We used an important word there, discipline. And this especially in this section is talking about young people disciplining themselves. Discipline yourself in the regards to the things that we've been saying. And you know, self-discipline is hard for us all in lots of different ways, but it bears good fruit. Self-discipline bears good fruit, and we need to work on self-discipline. All right. Now, we'll have time to read this. We may have time to discuss it all. Beginning in verse 2 and down through verse 8, he's going to talk about some of the symptoms that arise in old age. This is classic. This section is really classic, and I know you've studied it before and sort of made application of all the principles. Let's read it and then start unraveling it. Verse 2, chapter 12. So remember verse 1, he said, remember now thy created in the days of the youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure. No, now he said, so the evil days are coming, okay? The evil days are coming when you're going to say, I don't have any pleasure in life anymore. I'm so old and sick that I'm not enjoying life very much anymore. So he says, enjoy the days of your youth, serve your Creator in the days of the youth. Before you get old, do it, notice, verse 2, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the days, so he says, do it in your youth before these things happen. What's going to happen in your old age? The sun, the light, the moon, the stars will be darkened. The clouds will return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low. And he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. Also when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fears shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. Okay. I'm sure you've studied this text before and probably heard lessons about it, but it is surely a classic section here in the book of Ecclesiastes. He's describing old age, right? So very clearly in the context, he's saying, enjoy your young years, enjoy youth, know that old age is coming. It's unavoidable. It's inevitable. It's real. It's real. What's going to happen when you get old? Well, let's break that down. The sun, the light, the moon, the stars be darkened. I don't think he's talking there about eyesight, because I think he's going to mention eyesight in verse 3. I think here he's probably talking about intelligence, judgment, memory, your mind, your thinking powers. You know, when we get old, what happens is we don't sometimes think clearly. How often have you heard someone described in their old age and they are either, well, she's old, but she's still got a good, clear mind, which is actually somewhat exceptional, because how much more often do you hear, oh, he's old, he's got dementia. We used to say he's old, he's senile. You don't hear about an old person being senile so much anymore. You hear about an old person who's got dementia. He doesn't think clearly. And so I think that's the idea of verse 2. The sun, the light, the moon, the stars are darkened. That is, I'm not thinking clearly anymore. I think that has to do with the thought processes. Thoughts or comments here? Dale?
Greg, there's some things we can learn when we're young that seem so complicated when you're older. You know, as a machinist, I learned things back years ago now that I don't even think about when I do it. It's just a habit when you go do that. The same thing with religion. If you learn it when you're young, then when you're old, you do it out of habit. You don't have to go back and make it so hard.
Yeah.
Because it comes natural.
Yeah. How often have those of us who are older been taught something, for instance, about how to make a computer work or a smartphone? Young people have greater capacity to grasp things quickly. Your time is coming, though, when that will sort of become harder. Your thought processes will be dimmed or not as keen. We won't be thinking as sharply. I think that's what he has in mind there in verse 2. Tom?
When I returned to college after I was almost 50, I guess, one of the classes they had us take was a class on learning for the older, adult. And there were different ways to learn and to memorize things than when you were younger. Used to, somebody could tell me a phone number, I didn't even have to write it down, I remember it. As you get older, your short-term memory doesn't hold it up and doesn't shift it to the long-term memory. So you have to work at moving stuff from your short-term memory to your long-term memory to remember. And there's things like repeating itself, reading it out loud, reading it and writing it down, keeping little jot notes, doing what you call a mind map, linking things together. All those type of things help you when you're older. When you're younger, it just seems like,
There's no doubt that young people have greater learning capabilities than old people do. We even have expressions for it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. We understand that. And so he says, when you get old, you young people realize when you get old, that's going to happen to you. It just does with age. But I really think that first part of verse 2 is talking about your intellect, your thinking powers. Then he says, the last part of verse 2, so serve God while you're young, because when you're old, the clouds return after the rain. The clouds return after the rain. That's right. He says, so do it while the clouds don't. So serve God while you're young, while the clouds do not return after the rain. So when you're young, different little storm clouds come upon the horizon, but they pass quickly and you're back to good times again. So when you're young, there's some issues to deal with when you're young. There's some troubles of life when you're young, but they tend to pass quickly when you're young, and you're right back to doing normal. Even, for instance, an injury or a physical ailment. When you're young, you've got great recuperative powers. You get over that quickly, you're right back to normal real fast. When you're old, the clouds return out. So when you're young, there's a rainy day, but the next day's bright and sunny and you're on your way again. When you're old, there's a rainy day, and the next day, the clouds linger. They don't pass. In other words, the bad weather, used metaphorically, the bad weather just keeps on. You don't break out of a rainy day into a bright sunny day when you're old. When you're old, you have a rainy day, and the next day is cloudy and gloomy, and the next day and the next day. It just continues. You don't recover quickly, and you don't bounce back as fast. You're dealing with the infirmities of age. That's what he's talking about there, I think. Thoughts or comments, Tom?
You see those decades as we get older. What I used to be able to do in my 20s and 30s, you didn't even think about it. Jumping up on a trailer, jumping off, getting out working all day, coming in, doing something. Another decade passed. It takes a little longer to get that done, and muscles hurt and ache, and you got to make sure you take that hot shower to get that over with. And then you thought, now push these 70 decades. It just you have these injuries and these.
So you're saying, Tom, what you're saying is that you are personally experiencing the onset of old age, right? Given the option, wouldn't you have avoided that?
Oh, definitely.
But back to some of the very early things we said, that's not in your power. These things are not in our power to change. It's going to happen. We just need to realize that. Let's take one more. We're just out of time. By the way, read this section again before next Sunday and see if you can put a meaning to every one of the phrases. Notice he says, in old age, he's describing old age, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. When the keepers of the house shall tremble. I think he's talking, Tom's got it, I think he's talking about your hands. And you've seen old people afflicted and their hands just sort of shake like that. We know now, maybe we would identify it as some degree of Parkinson's disease or something that makes your hands tremble like that. But you've seen old people who just can't hold a steady hand. That comes with old age. And I think that's what he's talking about when he talks about the keepers of the house shall tremble. So, and then the next phrase too, and the strong men shall bow themselves. The strong men. It's either the back or the legs. When you're doing heavy work, what part of your body do you use to do heavy work? Well, your legs. My grandmother always used to say, save your back, save your back. She'd say, if you were picking up something heavy, she'd say, save your back. So, you save your back by using your legs, they say. So, but those are the strong men. Those are the strong men of the house, your legs and your back. That's what does all the heavy lifting, all the heavy work. What's going to happen to your back and your legs? They're going to bow themselves. That is, and so here's an old man, and he's stooped over, and he's just walking like this now. He used to be straight, upright, and strong. And now he's all bent over in his old age. Well, that's what happens in old age. So his point is, serve God before all this onset of frailties of life set in. It's a really interesting section. We'll continue there next. We're probably going to wrap that up next week. If you want to get a copy of the Hebrew workbook, it's out there on the table. And again, that's what we'll go to when we conclude this study.